Hi everyone, Pam Gregory, astrologer. Really happy to be back with you today. Talking about the biggie, the total solar eclipse in Aries that we're going to have on the 8th. And in addition to that, it's a super moon because the moon is very close in its orbit to the Earth. So that increases the intensity of it and the potential of it for all kinds of good for us as well. Just before I go into the astrology, many of you have been asking about David Farrell. Um, just to update you, as many of you know, about a month ago, he had a terrible fall. He fell about 12 feet and broke many bones in his feet, and had major surgery in Guadalajara. They still are there at the moment, David and his partner. And he went through a 5.5 hour surgery, all went well. And although obviously he still can't stand, he feels that he is starting to heal well. And so I'll put a video below. In the first few moments of that, he's actually updating everyone on his progress. I'll also include his donate button. Any of you feel able to donate funds to David, because obviously the medical expenses have been huge, and also he's lost a lot of income. So if you've watched his videos, he's helped you in any way, that would be a wonderful payback. So I'll put that underneath the video. So what I'm now going to talk about today, as I say, is the biggest eclipse of the year by a long way, the total solar eclipse supermoon in Aries. And I'm filming this on the day of the lunar eclipse on the 25th of March. The sun is extremely activated right now. We're in the middle of an enormous geomagnetic storm. So I am really hoping I get to the end of this recording without incident. Huge X-class flare, kind of twin X-class flare just a day or so ago, that spanned several hours, I believe. Many M-class flares. The sun is very active. Remember that however physically uncomfortable, these are powerful ingredients for your evolution, and they are linked to the expansion of our consciousness. They are linked to the expansion of our consciousness. And so we are being fast-tracked in our evolution. And so therefore, try not to resist, however uncomfortable, however much you're struggling not to sleep, and welcome them in. So, as I say, we're in this accelerated period of evolution. Now, right at the beginning of the year, when I was looking at the whole forecast for this year, I pointed out that April would be one of the absolute peak months of the year, and I believe it absolutely will be. Not only do we have the eclipse on the 8th that I'm principally going to be talking about in this video, but we've also got another very important astrological aspect later in the month on the 20th. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Both of those are very important astrological events. The energies of them are blending together through April, and neither of them are just for a day. I want to say that very clearly. Neither of them are just for a day. Total solar eclipses, any eclipse actually, we feel up to a month before and up to 6 months later. And this one in particular, I think we'll feel till the end of the year. But even with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which happens on the 20th, it isn't just for one day. That is the spark point, the trigger point, the whatever you want to call it, the ignition point for all that is to follow through the rest of the year. So this is a kind of jump for us, I think, in energy. But eclipses are pivot points that often there are times of endings and beginnings. And lunar eclipses, I think, are more difficult generally, because they represent beginnings. And the one today on the 25th of March, because it is also conjunct the south node of the moon. For eclipses to happen, the moon has to be close to either the north node or the south node. The south node is our collective past, and because the moon is closest to that at the lunar eclipse, it emphasizes the ending, the shedding, the release, particularly around relationship issues, perhaps relationships that are no longer for your highest good or are not an honest expression of who you are now. They just have to pass, and we move on in our journey of frequency. Solar eclipses, I generally think, are easier. And although that, as I say, this one is very powerful, but it's easier because it's very much a new beginning. As you'll see when I show the chart, the sun and moon are pretty close to the North Node. That is our collective path for the future, our collective path of growth. And it's also in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. So this is very much emphasizing the new beginning aspect of this, both for the collective and for us individually. So, but they are pivot points. They tend to bring up permanent endings and new beginnings. They act as wild cards, really. I always think of eclipses like a bit like Uranus transits, because things can come out of the blue from nowhere, to jump you back on your path of destiny if you've strayed from it in any way. And particularly this total solar eclipse supermoon is at 19 degrees and 24 minutes of Aries. So see where that falls in your chart, which house area, because that is going to give you an indication of the potential meaning for you. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website, go to the link below, and you can get a 2-part video series, and that is not anything to do with the personalized astrology reading. These are teaching videos to teach you from zero how to find these points in your chart that I refer to in these updates, and therefore what the meaning is for you, the context of what I'm for you of what I'm talking about in these updates. It's interesting, lunar eclipses tend to, on the public stage, suggest some ending or closure for a prominent female. Solar eclipses tend to be that for males, because the sun is the male principle. So this can be over the coming months. It doesn't have to necessarily be in April, as I say. There could be some major closure, stepping down of one or some of from the world's leaders, prominent leaders, or people in the public eye in some way. It's quite interesting, actually, that this total solar eclipse also falls on the moon of the Prime Minister of Canada. The moon for him is in his 8th house of secrets, etc. And the moon for him rules his 11th house of politics and popularity. So it'll be very interesting to see how that unfolds in the world. So this, as many of you know, the two big total solar eclipses previously, one was in August of 2017 and the other was in October of last year. The eclipse paths were falling northwest to southeast across America. This one, on the 8th of April, is going to be falling northeast to southwest across America and the northwest of Mexico, and going through the little bit of the northeast of Canada, including Ottawa, the government centre, of course, in Ontario. So, and where the eclipse path falls, those tend to be areas where there is a lot of change or a lot of news coming out from that area. You know, for instance, if you look back to August 2017, whatever you think of the politics of what was happening then, were there a lot of changes for the US? Absolutely. You betcha. And the crossing point of these 3 total eclipses, and I'll put the link below so you can see the visual for this, but this is in Texas. So for the last year or so, I've often referred to Texas as that's going to be a very important area for us to consider at the time of this total solar eclipse. And also remember, we are still in the context of the Pluto return for the US. Even though Pluto has edged now into Aquarius, and their natal Pluto in the chart for the US is at 27 of Capricorn, nevertheless, that is a process of several years. So Texas is being highlighted as something unfolding there that is an important ingredient for the whole Pluto return for the US. And I've been saying over the last year that is going to really throw up issues around what is the US in terms of the states making it up, because we're now revisiting that from its original 1776 birth time, if you like. Which states make up the US? What is that going to mean politically, constitutionally, economically, because Pluto's in the second house of the country's chart. All of those, the values for the US. And Texas is an important ingredient. And as I understand it, and yes, there are lots of layers of smoke and mirrors to this, so please don't write to me about those, because I'm very aware of those. But nevertheless, the fact that that Texas is saying they will obey constitutional law but no longer federal law is an interesting piece of this process. So just observe in terms of what's happening. Now, if the solar eclipse at 19 of Aries falls personally on your sun, your ascendant, your midheaven, this can actually throw you into prominence in some way. You can suddenly get an opportunity that comes again out of the blue, or somebody promotes your work, or there's a big project that comes in. Things are usually out of the blue. This is never gradual or linear. With an eclipse, it's a bit of a jump. But solar eclipses can be very positive if they're conjunct your sun, your ascendant, your midheaven. So watch for that. Also, if you look back to the same day, 8th of April 2005, we had a total solar eclipse at 19 degrees of Aries, exactly the same degree as we have now. So obviously that's going to be the same house area for you, area of life. So if you go back to the 8th of April 2005, what was happening for you then? Because that may give you some insight as to what may be unfolding this time around. I remember for me, I was leaving my marriage of 19 years. We'd married at 19 years before, and that was the time I was leaving my marriage. Interestingly, that was the month that Prince Charles, as he then was, married Camilla Parker Bowles. I think that's quite interesting too. But just see where it falls, and that can give you some insights. So it's, and if you have any planets or angles between 16 degrees to 22 degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, you will probably find that this total solar eclipse affects you more personally, more directly. And remember, it isn't just for a day. It's just going to have consequences for the next 6 months at least. Always, because this is really a very, very big new moon, perfect time in the month to set a new intention. Don't forget also, whenever you set your intentions, set them in the present tense, otherwise you keep chasing them into the future. And so present tense, and I always say now, before I'm filming a video, having an important conversation, let this be for my highest good, the highest good of all, and the highest good for Gaia. I say that every time now, because that will then ripple out into the collective. So let's think about the sign of Aries. And inevitably, because it's ruled by Mars, as many of you know, it does have a shadow side of being more warlike. Mars was the god of war in myth, more warlike, more aggressive, more angry. And so, yes, we have war drums beating all over the world in lots of places. You don't have to focus on that. You don't have to feed what you absolutely don't want to see more of. Stay in peace. Stay calm. Just withdraw from all of that. Switch off the news. Just don't engage. Don't be part of that timeline. It's only if you follow the news, even if you think you're not really engaging, you're just being passive in listening to it, you are actually in a very suggestible state to take that fear in. Do not engage, I would suggest. Stay in peace. Switch off all of the things that disturb your frequency. This couldn't be more important at this time. Very positively, personally, this is the sign to do with self-sufficiency, independence, being a pioneer, going solo very often. It's about your inner authority, your courage, your sense of sovereignty. And this can also encourage us to break new ground, to go on a new adventure, and particularly because it's being reinforced by the Jupiter conjunction with Uranus, which is very much about risk taking, break loose, do something different. And it's interesting in my conversation with Nancy Rebecca that I posted recently on my channel, she was also getting spiritual insight for us to do something different, break the pattern, just change up your routine, even do something in a different order through your day if you tend to have very structured days, break new ground, because Uranus transits are linked to what we have already outgrown anyway. And so really think about what can you do that's different? What do you really long to do, but somehow the routine of your days or your obligations have sort of held you in a certain pattern? Dare to break that pattern, because this is very much about new energy. And I think one of the big things I want to say with Aries as well, Aries is a very simple, direct energy. And I can feel this very much in myself because I actually have 3 planets in Aries. And it's very uncomplicated. It doesn't fret about the past, look back to the past. The past is going to go to dust anyway. Doesn't worry too much about the future. It lives in the present of, I want to go do this thing. I want to go for a bike ride. Boom, I'm going for a bike ride. Don't have to check in with anyone. I'm going to go climb that mountain. Boom, I go climb that mountain. It's a very simple, direct, in the present energy. So I really suggest that we get into the habit of being in the present. And the way we do that is by warmth, just dropping into stillness, dropping into peace. As often as you can, just drop into warmth. I am completely present, completely peaceful, maybe bare feet on the grass, maybe listening to bird song, maybe listening to sacred music, whatever it is to get you there. And that becomes your kind of default method to get you there. And try and do that as often in the days you can. Because stillness and peace, they are some of the most important tools in your toolkit, because the present, being absolutely focused in the present, is where our power lies. The power of now, Eckhart Tolle, where our power lies going forwards more than ever, I think, with all the complexity of the outer world. And yeah, I'll come back to that. But yeah, do something different. It was interesting in my conversation with Nancy Rebecca, because she was being given spiritual insight that the white matter in our brain, the corpus callosum, she saw as initially being very rigid. And I instantly thought, of course, of Saturn, which rules the skeleton, the bones, and the skin, and the teeth in the body. But she saw it as actually starting to open up and become more flexible. And I got very excited because you'll see in a moment on the chart that Chiron, the asteroid Chiron, is exactly to the minute part of this total solar eclipse. It's at 1924 of Aries, exactly. And Chiron orbits between Saturn and Uranus astronomically. So Saturn is the rigidity, the way we've always done things. It rules the human body structure. But Uranus is where we break out. We do something different. We become more flexible. We kind of jump forwards to a higher state of being, a higher state of mind, if you like. So I think it's so interesting that part of this message of Chiron being exactly enmeshed in this total solar eclipse is about gaining that flexibility. And as I say, the increased sun's activity, all solar flares, the big geomagnetic storm we're in the middle of, all of that is linked to an expansion of our consciousness. as is the reactivation of our 24th chromosome that I talked about. I think it was in the last update, the lunar eclipse update, and I talked about it at the end of that. So these things are all kind of coming together, as it were. With Chiron has a whole other meaning of the maverick, the outsider. And I've been saying recently that I think the outsiders will become the leaders. Not that they want to be the leaders, it's just because they have strong inner authority and sovereignty, because they may be visionaries or progressives in the world. People will want to gather around them, teams of people saying, I want to understand, I want to learn, I want to help progress those ideas. So Chiron the maverick is really being highlighted here. That's one aspect, I think, of this total solar eclipse. And also, as you'll see in a moment, because Mercury is very tightly conjunct Aries, and the one who demands social inclusion. Nobody is to be on the periphery. Everybody is equal. Everybody is to have a voice. Truth, justice, honesty. And she is relentless in demanding that. So, and what's interesting as well is the path of Mercury. So with Mercury, Mercury is going to be retrograde from the 2nd to the 25th of April, and it comes to conjunct Chiron 3 times. And just to follow this through for a moment, so Mercury, while it's direct on the 20th of March, first time it conjuncts Chiron. Second time, it's retrograde, 17th and 18th of April, it's retrograde, conjuncts Chiron exactly for a second time. Third time, by then it's direct again on the 6th of May, it conjuncts Chiron a third time. And that's a kind of process, I think, of understanding the wounding, because of course Chiron is the wounded healer. And I've spoken quite a lot recently about Chiron in Aries being that sense of I am wounded in the I am. Everybody has it somewhere in their birth chart. That's where your original wound is. Wounded in the I am. And so if I see that in someone's birth chart, I'll say to them, for whatever reason, when you're very young, did you have a sense of, I don't have a right to exist? But that is meant to be turned into leadership. It's one of your life lessons as you move through to turn that into leadership. So because Aries is linked to the I amness, that sense of self, that sense of center, Aries, Chiron, as well as being linked to physical illness, physical wounding, can also be a signature for victim consciousness, where we have been victims either individually or collectively in society. This is a bigger collective thing, I think. There is great potential for healing at this total solar eclipse and ongoing, but only when we come to fully understand what that has been about. That's the Mercury piece I've just been talking about. And so it is understanding that and having, the total solar eclipse, the light of the sun is blocked and it kind of judders, but then the light comes back. And that's where a lot of truth can be revealed. The total solar eclipse will last 4.5 minutes. And when the light comes back on, that's when we will start to see truth coming to light, I think. And that will be because Jupiter-Uranus is very much about truth coming to light too. And I think that will be an ongoing process this year, which will change many things. So, and really see April as a jump. This is not linear evolution. This represents a jump in our consciousness for us. And, I love, as many of you know, Buckminster Fuller's philosophy, that he always said, don't try and kind of fix or fight the current system if it's not working. Go beyond that and create something so amazing. Everybody says, I want to be there. I want to be in that world. And therefore the current world that isn't working well will just become redundant, irrelevant, obsolete. Because I'm with Bucky on this. And linked to that, it's very interesting because I was listening to Greg Braden the other day, and he was talking about the new Earth, and he was saying to the audience, okay, you're very keen to move to new Earth. What does it look like? Tell me. And he said the answers he got almost exclusively were people referring to aspects of the current paradigm, because that's what we've grown up in. That's all we've known in our lives. So we have to form a new model, if you like, a new structure of some kind, even if we don't know the detail of what New Earth is going to be like, in order to start to magnetize it towards us, to envisage it, to imagine it, to envisage it, to start to make it real in the quantum field, to get those flickering lights in the plasma, in the crystalline plasma, to pull it to us, to magnetize it as New Earth all the faster. And I would suggest that we shift from the mind to the heart. We start operating from the heart. We start operating from these core emotions of love, joy, compassion, peace, gratitude, appreciation, in love with all of nature, and seeing nature as just humming with love, humming with life force. It's electromagnetic that the animals are sending you love, the trees are sending you love, the grasses and the mosses are just humming with this life force of love. You can start to kind of imagine that and seeing everything in heightened colors. And this is the kind of thing I've been suggesting in those very simple 15-minute meditations on a Sunday that so many thousands of people are joining in with. And these wonderful experiences people report back about. We're creating this tsunami of love, or this army of love, moving forwards and getting stronger every week. These are the kind of pillars that we are weaving New Earth around. And laughter, but heightened senses, heightened colors, and everything is heightened because we are developing much greater psychic sensitivity as we expand our consciousness. And so I'd like to suggest something else to you. And it's something, again, I mentioned at the end of the last update, because a lot is coming out now about the lost continent of Lemuria. And although there's some debate about whether Lemuria actually existed, it was said to exist as a very large continent. Greg Braden, again, talks a great deal about this. And remember, he's originally a geologist, that there was a very large continent west of the Americas that sort of included Easter Island and down towards Australia, New Zealand area, Polynesia, that for whatever reason either sank or waters rose or whatever. And Hawaii is actually the peak of the mountain that's left after Lemuria disappeared. And my good friend Heather Ensworth has interviewed a wonderful chap called Keone, who is from that lineage of Lemuria and still continues that culture. And they're fascinating interviews, and I'd highly recommend them to you. I'll put one of them below for you. And so between the ancient maps that have been found in Tibet and Asia, that again Greg Braden talks about, there does appear to have been a real Lemuria. And the reason I'm mentioning this now is that is probably the closest we have come to a really perfect, really wonderful spiritual civilization. And through many, either through, Keone's lineage or through many people channeling Lemuria. Books have been written about it. Cryon's channeling a lot about it at the moment. Shirley MacLaine has written a lot about her previous life in Lemuria. They all describe it as something highly spiritual, where Everyone had a sense of oneness, that everything was connected to oneness, that you had reverence and love for every living being. It was unthinkable, it was inconceivable to hurt another living being. Think how that would solve any wars that we have right now and the suffering we have. That Lemurians principally lived in their light body. They were attached on a silver cord to the earth, came into their physicality intermittently, but they would do healing for people in crystal temples that were situated on the tops of mountains, because that's where the greatest energy vortex was. They understood energy, electromagnetism, and this kind of flow of love, really. That's what they lived in. And so whether you believe all of that or not, it doesn't even really matter, actually. Because if you can just accept it as an imagining, as a vision, as a dream, it's a jolly good template for New Earth, unless you can think of something better. It's a really good template to start with. It's a starter template, even for New Earth, because I personally believe, and I've mentioned this recently, that I think we could start to see land masses emerge that actually were part of old Lemuria, ancient Lemuria, that become new Lemuria, like, for instance, that huge mountain range that was discovered off the coast of Chile recently that has all kinds of new species, from the fertile algae, because it's been under the sea, that kind of thing, because there will be, I think, ongoing, because of the unstable geomagnetics, more seismic activity. So it could well be we see land masses re-emerging. But it's just really the frequency of Lemuria that's the principal thing. The frequency of Lemuria, the frequency of love, the frequency of oneness, the frequency of connection, the frequency of making it unthinkable to hurt another living being, that every living being has reverence and is sacred. That's a pretty good place to start with New Earth if you're finding it a struggle to imagine what that may be like. And think of this heightened awareness, that heightened consciousness, expanded consciousness that we're trying to cultivate. And in many ways, it's happening naturally because of all the solar flares and the photonic light that are coming into us. They are reactivating our DNA, but they are very much helping to expand our consciousness. Okay, so let us look now at the chart. I'll share my screen here. So as always, I've cast this chart for London. The total solar eclipse supermoon is happening at 11:22 a.m. Pacific, and UK will actually be on BST, British Summer Time, by then. And this is universal time, but we will be 7:22 in the evening. So unless you live in the UK, ignore this clock face, ignore the houses. We're just looking at the signs where the planets are falling and their aspects to each other. So here we have the sun and moon, 1924 of Aries, and Chiron smack bang in the middle, exact to the minute. So see where this falls in your chart. As I say, we have got a real load in Aries. Aries is root chakra, but is also, I believe, suggesting a very high potential for Kundalini activation for us now and going forwards. I'm saying that because of all of this root chakra energy, all of these planets in Aries, and also Uranus is linked to Kundalini energy in Taurus, the sign for the human body, expanded by Jupiter. As I say, that conjunction becomes exact on the 20th of April. So, yes, so sun and moon here, very close to the North Node. And I've talked about the path of Mercury, how it comes to conjunct Chiron 3 times. And whatever Mercury discovers about wounding, healing, uncovering our victim consciousness, the potential for Mercury is to become very vocal at the time of the total solar eclipse. It's going to be very vocal because it's in Aries, which can be quite blunt and direct and outspoken, and it's very tightly conjunct Eris. Eris takes no truck. Eris is going to speak the truth. Eris is going to create mayhem to make sure the truth and justice come to the fore. So that is, I think, a very interesting aspect of this. So I also would suggest to you as well that as we go into this total, well, actually, all the way through this year, from all the way through the rest of your life, frankly, but particularly at this total solar eclipse in Aries, check in with your filter. I said this in a recent video. Check in with your filter. What is your belief system? Do you believe that life doesn't work for you, that you're always a loser? Because that creates your reality. That's your template to create your reality. Is your belief system that you are actually already on the highest timeline of love? And if you live in love through your day, and not a pink, fluffy, romantic love, I'm talking about love as a state of being, you will be on the highest timeline. And if you believe that you have already succeeded in doing that, you are already there. You're going to have a much smoother ride. You're going to have a bubble wrapped ride through this huge transformation for humanity, if that's your filter, if that's your belief system. I really would encourage you, because that really defines your reality and how we structure our reality, how it's formed. It's just as easy to create something amazing as it is to create something fearful. Just as easy. It takes the same amount of energy. Astrology is pure potential, remember. Now, I've talked in a separate video about big themes for Jupiter-Uranus. I'll put that video below as well. I'm going to make another one looking specifically at the chart for that time for the second half of April. So that will be the next update video. But it's a very important aspect of this solar eclipse. It's about awakening. It's about Kundalini activation, as I say. It's about much more revolutionary energy, much more truth coming to light, big jumps in consciousness, quantum leaps, could be galactic connections in some way, a lot of truth being revealed, I think, and ongoing. So it's going to be particularly interesting, actually, when Uranus moves to conjunct Sedna, be in Gemini by then, in the middle of next year, June, July time, I think. I think we'll have a lot more galactic news and connection at that time. But that's kind of rushing down the pipeline a little bit. So I'll save everything else I want to say about Jupiter-Uranus until the next update. A tight conjunction here between Mars and Saturn. Now, whenever I see Mars and Saturn, I see it a lot in the charts of people who go into the military, and because it's a disciplined energy, very disciplined energy. Now, in Pisces, that could suggest some kind of military activity at sea. That could be how it works. But actually, I think a better use of it is disciplined spiritual practice. Disciplined Saturn, spiritual Pisces, Mars practice. Energy being put into a daily disciplined spiritual practice. That's a very good expression of that. We also have Venus at 4 of Aries. It's actually a conjunct dwarf planet called Manwe at 2 of Aries. Manwe, you may remember, was in the creation myth with his wife Vada. They were said to be responsible for the creation of the cosmos, the creation of the universe. Manwe is the highest archangel, closest to the mind of God, the highest intelligence in the universe. That's Manwe. So we are a very strong symbol for New Earth. We are creating New Earth with love, Venus. Beautiful, really beautiful. Another aspect to point out, which really links to everything I was saying about Lemuria, is this is dwarf planet Haumea. And we're going to have to get used to these funny squiggly glyphs, but this is most definitely Haumea. Now, Haumea at one of Scorpio, remember the fire goddess aspect of the myth with Haumea, that in her fire goddess aspect, she was said to birth the 8 islands of Hawaii through the volcanic action, in all the lava coming out. And Hawaii, as I say, was said to be the base for Lemuria and is still where the culture continues in that lineage. So that is very interesting that Haumea here, with linking back to Hawaii in the myth, is Quindachile. That's what that little Q is, this black line, to the North Node. The North Node is our, as I've said, is our collective path of growth for the future. Now, Quindichiles, very few astrologers use them. They are aspects of 165 degrees. They have a very tight orb of about two degrees either way, but they are an aspect of upheaval, obsession or upheaval. So I think it's very interesting that this is potentially about upheaval being a necessary part, maybe linked literally to the birthing of land. That seems to be a necessary part for where we are headed with our North Node that is so central to this total solar eclipse supermoon in Aries. Another aspect I would like to point out, I mean, there's so much here and I won't touch on everything, but Haumea is in this long-running square to Pluto, which I've talked about many times, as really being the death, transformation, and rebirth for New Earth. The old Earth is dying. We are seeing the end, not of the world, but of a world. And I think that's very clear. That's very strong as a theme for this year. There is also I think it's now categorized actually as a dwarf planet now, certainly the largest body in the asteroid belt called Ceres. Now, I talked quite a lot about Ceres in 2020 because Ceres then was absolutely part of that very important Saturn-Pluto conjunction on the 12th of January 2020 that kicked off the whole pandemic. And Ceres was right in there at 22 degrees of Capricorn. Ceres in myth, you may know, is the mother of Persephone. Persephone in the myth was kidnapped and taken down to Hades. And Ceres, as the mother, was so distraught. She is linked to harvests and grains and food supply, really. She was so distraught that she made the earth barren in order to get her daughter back, to get Persephone back from Hades. And so a deal was struck, if you like, that in order for Persephone to return in the spring, Ceres' part of the deal was she would make the earth barren. She would make it winter where nothing would grow, if you like, for several months in order to make sure that her daughter came back each year. So very linked to, as I say, food supply, harvests and grains. I think it's extremely interesting that Ceres is in a tight square, 17 of Capricorn, linked to 19, square to 19, 24 of Aries, tight square to this total solar eclipse. So something is emerging around food supplies, grains harvest. Now that may be because of all the extreme weather we're having for all kinds of reasons. Remember that the unstable geomagnetics are partly due to natural cycles. We're peaking in solar cycle 25, but also due to some unnatural electromagnetism, because we have never, ever in our lives or all of our lifetimes had the degree of artificial EMFs circling our Earth in the form of satellites than we have ever had before. And that is affecting the geomagnetics, the ionosphere as well. So it's all, everything is connected. So with that in mind, for whatever reason, I've often suggested that even if you're living in a very small place, you must have a windowsill, grow some microgreens. Really simple. You can grow them in 3 days. They're ever so cheap to grow, and they are incredibly nutritious. So if there's any kind of hiccup for whatever reason, internet goes to, whatever, um, then you have some really nutritious food to eat. Really easy to do that. And you can find out how on the internet. So, but the interesting thing about Ceres is that it was at 22 of Capricorn, as I say, at the beginning of 2020. It comes back to 22 of Capricorn in mid-November. And that is also the time when Pluto, as you probably know, on the 19th of November, enters Aquarius fully for 20 years. That is also, of course, a very important time for the US elections. We're back to the US being in the crosswires here. And remember, Aquarius is the sign of truth, of freedom, of awakening, of revolution. So we have a lot going on here. We have an awful lot going on at this total solar eclipse. So I think what I just really like to say, I'm going to stop sharing here. I mean, there's so much in this chart I could talk for hours, but those are the main themes, I think. Really encourage you to have a filter of feeling excited, feeling that you are on the highest timeline of love, dropping into peace and stillness and single-pointedness as often as you can. Remember what that wonderful Buddhist author Paul Levy talks about, that our focus is a superhero ability. It's a superhero ability because that's what we're using to create tomorrow. Tomorrow's invisible. We're creating it right now. And you're creating it by listening to this video. I'm creating it by making it. We're all adding to the collective of love. What you focus on, you become. Feel that in your bones. What you focus on, you become. And feel the expansion of consciousness. When you're out in nature, when you're out in the garden, if you're in a local park, try to feel, kind of feel that you're melding with the trees or the plants or the grass. So you have that sense of oneness with nature. And again, if you can't think of anything better, we're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. We're welcoming in an expanded consciousness of love. The most important thing, really, as we move forwards this year and forever, I would say, is keep checking in with your state of being. Use post-it notes, as I've suggested. Keep checking in with your state of being. What's your state of being? What's your frequency? What are you thinking about? Are you in those states of love, joy, laughter, compassion, peace, or not? And that is your GPS. That is your personal GPS moving forwards. We're going to have a really exciting month. Remember, if you live from the inside out, as I've said many times, this is a very simple way to live, because what you're focused on is your state of being and really your heart. And that's it. And you're putting that stamp, love, joy, on your day. When we live from the outside in, it's absolutely overwhelming. The degree of suffering, misery, war, it is beyond horrific. And that's why I make these videos. My part in this is to try and, whatever humble, simple way I can, to try and get us to envisage a way more wonderful, loving and compassionate and peaceful world, just like Buckminster Fuller suggested, so we can start to magnetize that and get beyond all this horror. Live from the inside out. Big months to come. Feel that you are a surfer riding the biggest wave you have ever surfed. And this is going to carry you higher up the beach than you have ever been. God bless. If you're still with me, thank you so much for listening. This is quite a long video, I know, but it's a very important eclipse, and have a wonderful total solar eclipse supermoon in Aries. Don't forget to set your new intention. Remember to do it for the collective and for Gaia too. God bless. Thank you for being with me. I'll be back very soon. Bye for now.